thing to realize when considering offshore banking is that it is very similar to banking down the street. You can view your account online. You can transmit bank wire transfers in and out of your account. Many offshore banks have debit cards associated with the account. In fact, I've been in the company formation and offshore banking industry since 1991. And over nearly 3 decades as of this video, we have built the largest organization in the country and possibly the world that establishes international companies and bank accounts and trusts. I've walked down Bahnhofstrasse, the street with the largest number of banks in Switzerland, and have had close relations with Swiss bankers for over 15 years. We have relationships with banks in other parts of Europe, North America, Asia, South and Central America, Australia, Africa, and I personally know the CEOs of bankers in the Caribbean and the South Pacific. I have met with multiple prime ministers and premiers around the world, as you can see from pictures on our website. Now, who you use for your offshore banking needs is extremely important. After all, this is your money we're talking about. You don't likely drive the cheapest car you can find, and so you don't want the cheapest offshore services you can find as well. You might ask someone who sets up a Nevis company, for example, if there are any taxes due. And they might say, no, Nevis is tax-free. We would say, however, there may not be taxes on offshore companies in Nevis, but people in the US, Canada, UK, Australia, and many other countries worldwide tax income regardless of where you earn it, therefore saving you possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties and fees. Now, my purpose with this video is to make it the most comprehensive and complete video on offshore banking on the internet, and I hope it informs you and, if needed, gives you the comfort to set up your own offshore bank account. Now let's continue. As you know, a local accountant, or a local account, that is, does not consist of little pieces of paper, currency, stuffed into a cubbyhole with your name on it. Your bank account is simply computer data on a bank's network that is backed up on servers around the world. Now, should you travel to another country on vacation, you will still be able to access your account, withdraw funds, etc. Likewise, your bank account overseas consists of computer code, likely backed up on the exact same global computer network as the friendly neighborhood bank. So it does not matter whether you bank down the street on the corner or on the other side of the planet. Either way, your money is on the same place on the same global computer network. Banking safely. Now, offshore banking safety, with regards to bank safety, keep in mind there are international bank standards and financial standards that banks must meet. That is, before a bank can accept depositors from abroad, it must pass certain financial stress tests. For example, before a bank in Belize, Nevis, Cook Islands, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands can transmit wire transfers in US dollars, it generally needs to obtain a US correspondent bank. Obtaining a correspondent banking relationship carries certain requirements. For example, it must prove to the U.S. institution that its financial strength ratios comply with the strict international standards. Moreover, it must continuously pass these tests in order to maintain the relationship. In addition, there are rigorous government regulations within each of these jurisdictions. One hard and fast requirement is that banks must maintain substantial capital reserves in order to ensure depositor safety. Moreover, regulators continuously audit the banks, and this helps ensure that the banks remain in compliance and uphold the reputations of these popular financial centers. Now, there are restrictions on the number, amount, and security required for bank loans and investments. There are quarterly reporting requirements, plus bank officials must pass intensive background checks before they can obtain a directorship with the institution. Opening an offshore account. Standards and regulations. There's an international regulatory framework for banks, and these standards to which all banks worldwide must comply in order to transmit funds overseas. This includes the Basel III. The Basel III is a detailed set of standards, and the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision developed these standards for the industry. Now, its purpose is to solidify and unify the regulation, supervision, and risk management of the banking industry around the globe. And the intent of these measures are to do the following. One, to improve the banking industry's ability to absorb blows stemming from financial and economic stress regardless of the source. To improve risk management operations and oversight. To strengthen banks' transparency and disclosures. And there are international standards for the liquidity coverage ratio and the risk monitoring tools that banks must have in place. And it must accomplish this by making sure that a banking institution has a sufficient amount of unencumbered, high-quality liquid assets, HQLA, and these assets are ones that the bank can easily and immediately convert into cash. Now, these institutions can then turn to private markets in order to meet its liquidity demands for a 30-calendar-day liquidity stress scenario. Then there is the net stable funding ratio requirements. In these standard requirements, banks must keep a secure funding profile for both the short term and the long term. Now, offshore banking is common. Now, offshore banking is very common. Over 2.7 million U.S. citizens reportedly have offshore accounts. Offshore banking is not just for the top 1%. Banking offshore is available to anyone wanting to make and take advantage of the various benefits. Many of the foreign banks offer low deposit minimums, thus they make for a plausible option to anyone with a desire to open up an offshore account. Moreover, the benefits of having an offshore bank account go way beyond alternative investment opportunities and hiding your assets. These benefits affect the average person and can greatly improve your daily banking experience. In terms of security, accessibility, convenience, and peace of mind, it would seem that offshore banking is the ideal solution. Now, gone are the days of thinking of foreign banking as some distant, idealistic tax evasion scheme to hide money from your domestic government. On the contrary, it is legal, moral, and ethical when done properly. Moreover, it is a real, viable option and a sustainable option available to all willing to take advantage of it. Now, why learn more? Many Americans are not aware of what offshore banking really is. But alas, now is the time to start learning the truth about it. Offshore banking is utilization of a banking system in a nation different than one in which you reside, most favorably in a strong, stable jurisdiction. Now, there are numerous financial and legal benefits to banking offshore, and this could be due to an economy in the doldrums. It can be due to a poor Federal Reserve System tied to a government that's deeply in debt, such as the USA. Alternatively, it could be, as was the failure of Washington Mutual, hugely capitalized banks failing the stress test. Thus, it seems imperative to start examining offshore banking as a legitimate option. Now, with the American banking system and the European banking system over-leveraged at best, you may also want to look at these reasons that we're going to discuss below. Diversification. Banking offshore offers currency diversification for your savings. This is very useful for maintaining a safe, stable, long-term investment portfolio. Now, very few domestic banks offer options for holding diverse currencies. Holding assets overseas in different currencies allows you to take advantage of the jumps in currency fluctuations. After the 9/11 disaster, many people opened Canadian bank accounts and converted U.S. dollars to Canadian dollars. Many made a handsome 30% profit as the U.S. dollar tanked and the Canadian one strengthened. So holding various currencies can diversify investments, offer a higher return in certain market conditions, and lower risk. International markets. It allows for diverse flow of income. It is also pertinent to consider that while the U.S. was in a recession in 2008, Asia's market was booming. Limiting your business domestically restricts you. So you may also want to reap the benefits of economies doing well while your domestic economy may not be. In fact, you may consider establishing more than one foreign account. As such, you can ensure yourself that you are taking full advantage of the favorable international banking laws. In Switzerland, for example, the banks are also the investment management firms. Swiss banking comes with some of the top money managers in the world, so A financial planner in the institution can suggest a portfolio that offers a great combination of growth and safety. The U.S., on the other hand, limits the number of trades in which a day trader can participate, so trading offshore can remove this cap. Interest rates. Better interest rates. The banks in the U.S. typically offer very low interest deposits. For example, at the current market rates, if you deposit $1,000 U.S. in January, you will make about $10 interest for the year. And of course, this varies year to year. Some may feel satisfaction or even thrill to make any amount of their savings. However, when you compare that to some of the international banks, you can find some significantly higher interest rates on your deposits offshore. And we're talking enough interest to make you set up an account just based on that benefit alone. Locations such as Australia, Switzerland, Netherlands, and France may not only offer great interest rates on your deposits, but they were also listed as home to some of the safest banks in the entire world. Wire transfer. You can move money quickly around the world. Along with diversifying your assets, having even a small offshore account allows you to move quickly. Offshore account holders have the flexibility to move funds if needed. For example, you may be in a situation where asset protection from lawsuits may become necessary. In addition, you may have regular transactions on international business deals. Both of these fundamentals are invaluable on their own. Now, along these lines, we also know that domestic banks often keep very limited funds on hand for large withdrawals. So this makes it much harder to readily access all of your money quickly. The challenge is here that there are numerous situations where this sort of limitation can be lethal in terms of asset protection. And why is this important? Here's why. What if you cannot withdraw your funds quickly? That is, you have a large account and you have a lawyer on the line behind you who wants to freeze your account until the bank hands it over. So by having an account offshore, ties the hands of your opponent, and you can move your money quickly or have an offshore trustee step in to protect you. Misperceptions. Perhaps a more common misconception is offshore banking is hiding assets from the taxman. In reality, this is rarely true. An offshore accounts are typically transparent for tax purposes. That being said, there are many ways to maintain limited privacy when utilizing an offshore account. Any American relocating $10,000 or more must report it. However, it is possible to have an account under $10,000 US without reporting it. You do, however, need to report if you're a signatory on a foreign account. Nonetheless, we highly recommend you seek licensed tax advice. Okay, countries with the safest banks. The safest banks are international. If you look into this, a more secure banking experience is offered offshore, and the Federal Reserve System that backs the U.S. banks in turn is backed by the most debt-ridden country on the planet. Moreover, top finance publications have released a list of the safest banks worldwide, none of which were U.S. national banks, absolutely none. Take Global Finance magazine, for example. They release a list of 50 safest banks every year. And the shocking thing is that it doesn't even mention any big American bank. As of this writing, the only American banks on the list are 3 small regional farming banks that are numbered 30, 45, and 50 on the list. And according to Global Finance, here are the countries with the safest banks: Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, Norway, Luxembourg, France, Canada, Singapore, and Sweden. Of the above countries, only Switzerland and Luxembourg will open accounts without the need to travel to the country. The minimum deposits are substantial, and the banker will eventually come to meet you in person. Internationally, however, it is easy to find banks within low-debt countries that don't and won't gamble your money. Consequently, they are able to keep more cash on hand for withdrawals. When you put it in terms of investing, where would you want to park your money? In a company swimming in cash, or one drowning in debt? Countries such as Switzerland and Luxembourg have strict banking regulations, and they implement checks and balances on all bank accounting practices. Many other offshore banks and countries have similar systems, and these systems help ensure people who are looking to bank offshore can do so safely and soundly. Greater security. In addition, many asset protection experts say that when you bank offshore, you are less attractive to lawsuits domestically. That is, if you tie up a chunk of your assets in offshore accounts, they are harder for your opponent to seize. And this may not be a concern for everyone, but keep in mind it is more difficult for someone to freeze your account in a snap if they are sitting in foreign banks. For long-term security, experts recommend holding your account in an offshore company and/or trust. Holding funds in these tools do not only give privacy, they can also offer substantial legal protection if a court order demands repatriation of the funds. Setting up an offshore account. This will likely come as no surprise. It is becoming more and more difficult for Americans to set up offshore accounts. And this information is highly pertinent, so it is essential to ask an experienced professional, such as our organization, to find the best bank you can for yourself. That is a service organization that provides these services. We know which banks will accept foreign clients. We're keen on knowing which banks we feel are the strongest and safest and which offer the most attractive services. Some things to look for. Availability for American clients is one, if you're an American. Availability for Canadians, UK citizens, Australians, and so on, depending where you are. Not all banks still accept these citizens, and so the ability to open up an offshore account remotely is another issue. There are some overseas banks that have options for clients to open accounts online or over the phone. Naturally, you will also need to provide the legally required Know Your Client documents. Other banks require that you visit their bank directly to open up an account. That said, some of these banks have domestic branches, therefore some will allow you to set up overseas accounts through the local branch. Typically, if a bank has a U.S. branch and you're in the U.S., that does not provide sufficient asset protection. So in these cases, set up an account overseas in an account that does not have a corresponding U.S. bank and hold the account in an offshore company and/or asset protection trust. We can help you with these services. The problem is that U.S. courts have jurisdiction over local branches, so it is important to use a bank that does not have corresponding local branches. Low minimums. Most banks require a minimum deposit to open up an account, and that goes for domestic and international accounts, by the way. So you'll want to seek a bank with minimum deposits within reason for you. Banks that have local clients as well as foreign clients. You can rest assured that a bank offering service to locals is going to be well scrutinized. A bank that only has foreign clients is often called a Class B bank, and these banks may be more easily overlooked by regulators. Class A banks can typically accept both domestic and foreign depositors. Tax information. Many foreign banks have strict privacy laws and do not disclose account information. Tax reporting, however, is a different issue. International financial institutions are responsible for filing certain forms for U.S. residents and for citizens. Doing so helps them comply with the U.S. tax regulations. This responsibility also allows with the account holder to report it properly. So in setting up an account offshore, you will also want to keep basic tax laws in mind. It is important to note that this, by the way, what is meant to be helpful information here is not tax advice. It is subject to change, so make sure to seek advice from a licensed accountant. That being said, it is recommended that Americans keep the following in mind. U.S. regulations. You must report all worldwide income, and this applies even if you pay foreign taxes on your income. Keeping money over yonder and only paying taxes when you bring it back ceased in 1964. Large corporations with a broad shareholder base can get away with this, but not an individual or closely held corporation. You have to report any foreign bank account exceeding $10,000 as of this video. This is supplementary to your income to report. If you have an offshore account exceeding $10,000, you have to file an FBAR form or whatever the current form is of today. Interest income. If you have any interest income, losses, gains, deductions, proceeds, any distributions, and any foreign asset higher than $50,000 US on the last day of the tax year or $75,000 US at any time during the year, you have to file a Form 8928. And again, these forms may vary over the years, so get up-to-date information from your licensed tax advisor. Penalties and interest for improperly reporting your taxes. There's no statute of limitations on tax evasion, so penalties can range from $10,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. Tax evasion, false reporting, and failing to report may carry stiff penalties, so be sure to comply with all taxes and legal decisions. Making the right decision. Aside from all of that, you may also need to bear in mind that no one bank is right for everyone. When some people say they need a bank account, we want to make sure that it's a highly capitalized bank and easy to access withdrawals. Others may look for asset protection benefits. Now, contrary to popular belief, offshore banking isn't about evading taxes, hiding your assets. It's more about building your business and securing your assets from vexatious litigation. That is, many people simply establish offshore accounts to benefit from favorable international regulations. Banking safely. As time goes on, in fact, it seems the question is less, is foreign banking for me? And it's more, is domestic banking right for me? This is not some fluke. This is a direct result of a shaky banking system. It is a system backed by a government that is in debt and a government that is burning through other people's money. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is in shambles. If you think otherwise, compare it with the equivalent agencies and countries that are not deep in debt. Certainly, the question is no longer about whether or not offshore banking is safe. The question we should be asking is this: which secure offshore bank should we use our personal, legal, business, and could provide financial benefits to ourselves? Offshore banking allows for increased financial privacy. Many individuals and companies around the world take advantage of these confidentiality benefits, and U.S. residents can enjoy the same financial rewards as these people by opening businesses and banking offshore. Protecting your money from divorce, lawsuits, and legal battles is another reason. You can open up offshore bank accounts in the name of offshore companies to provide maximum privacy and security. And offshore bank accounts are not just for the wealthy. This is there's a distinct rise in the number of Americans who put their money offshore into private financial accounts. And the purpose of this writing and this video is to provide the understanding and information on the subject. Privacy. Most offshore bank account jurisdictions have strict confidentiality rules and regulations, and they are in place to help ensure that identities of the depositors and investors, as well as the related transactions, are confidential. That is, the casual probe or prying eye will not be able to delve into your financial affairs. While this confidentiality is almost legendary, it is not possible to guarantee absolute privacy and anonymity. All financial institutions all over the world have implicit legal obligations. As such, they are to report and comply with investigations into suspected serious criminal activity. This, of course, includes terrorism, money laundering, and the fruits of the illicit drug trade. However, in the vast majority of instances, there is no compelling criminal accusation, so the depositor information is guarded in a jealous fashion. These offshore bank account jurisdictions are designed to provide the utmost in confidentiality and serve to judiciously protect and safeguard depositor information. This high level of confidentiality is especially noteworthy as it relates to protecting assets from domestic litigation. For example, civil matters such as divorce or contested estates are daily battled in the courts. It is not in the bank's interest to divulge confidential or depositor information. Thus, they have traditionally only done so reluctantly with certain rigorous tests that require a government agency to meet them. Any semblance of leaks or breaks in confidentiality would serve to break the confidence of other potential account holders, and as such, they would stand to lose a great deal of banking business. Privacy. Even deeper and tighter levels of anonymity and privacy and confidentiality are readily available. One can enhance the privacy through asset holding vehicles such as international business companies, IBCs, or offshore trusts. These tools offer mountains of protection compared to simply opening an offshore bank account. The goal of anyone looking to open one or more offshore bank accounts should be this: to strike the appropriate balance between asset protection, anonymity, security, and accessibility. It is important to have guidance. So be sure to get a hold of a consultant to find the right solution for you. Additional information about offshore banking. Popular jurisdictions for offshore bank accounts can be found in various parts of the world. However, it is very important to form an offshore company to own the offshore bank account. The offshore jurisdictions that offer the most privacy for the owners of the offshore company are not necessarily in the same jurisdiction as the offshore banking account provider. For example, one may drive a Mercedes automobile, but that car will likely not have Mercedes tires. It will likely bear Goodyear, Firestone, or Continental, or Michelin tires. Likewise, you'll want to choose the jurisdiction with the best financial tools. Then you'll want to choose the jurisdiction with the best financial institutions that meet your needs. For example, you can have a company on the island of Nevis and a bank in Switzerland. Nevis company law offers the maximum privacy of ownership, and Switzerland offers the strongest combination of banking safety and financial privacy. It is critical to establish the right combination for your specific needs. Join the crowd. Offshore.company.com is the world's authority in offshore banking services. The organization specializes in financial privacy and asset protection plans for a worldwide audience. The company has been in business since 1906, General Corporate Services, and we urge any prospective client to seek the assistance of a trusted offshore services coach. You can make contact by using the phone number or consultation form on offshorecompany.com. Opening an offshore account provides an alternative to the legal option to safeguarding your money. And this company has been there doing it since 1906. That's when our company was established. Robert Kiyosaki, the world-renowned entrepreneur, financial educator, and New York Times best-selling author, said this: "If you want to go somewhere, it is best to find someone who has actually been there. When financially successful people speak, it is often wise to listen." And as stated above, approximately 2.7 million Americans have their money in offshore accounts. U.S. politicians, wealthy investors, and celebrities alike take advantage of offshore banking opportunities. This number excludes the 7.6 million U.S. citizens living and banking abroad, according to the U.S. State Department. Also not included in this total are the number of U.S. military people living around the world who have international accounts. It doesn't matter if you are a U.S. citizen or an expatriate living overseas. Whatever the reason, most people can legally benefit from having an offshore account. The financial unsavvy U.S. The last domestic financial disaster that occurred in the U.S. occurred in 2008. During this time, some of the largest banking institutions went bankrupt. This was due to fraudulent practices that perpetrated on the working people of America. It sent shockwaves around the world. Billions of dollars in savings and pensions were lost, and the catastrophe left many people broke, having to start over. So who's saying that won't happen again? Before that, the U.S. stock market crashed in 2000. This was otherwise known as the dot-com bubble, as you recall. And then there was that famous day on October 19th, 1987 that was called Black Monday. And this was the biggest one-day financial meltdown in American history. It resulted in over $50 billion vanishing from the markets. And prior to that, the largest well-known financial pandemic was the Great Depression in 1929. Added to this are the many recessions between now and that time that ravaged the finances of Americans. Moreover, the U.S. is by far the most in-debt country in the world. As the interest on the national debt skyrockets, the odds of many more financial catastrophes in the United States may happen too. This includes the collapse of many banks that your money may be in. And don't rely on the FDIC to bail you out. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation is a U.S. government corporation providing deposit insurance to depositors in U.S. banks. The only problem is that, yes, it is backed by the most in-debt country on the planet. So what do the rich and informed do? It is widely known that diversifying your financial portfolio is the right way to go. Putting your money into stocks, mutual funds, index funds, and real estate are only a few options for the average investor. But If all these investments are in the USA, they can all be pulled down the same sinkhole. In the event of another U.S. financial collapse, investments can shrink into a fraction of the original value. So what if there are other investment options? What if there are options that you can put your money overseas, safeguard, diversify your financial portfolio, etc.? Moreover, what if you had the added bonus of having the utmost confidentiality in your investments? That's where offshore banking comes in. To prove how substantial the offshore account market is, over $32 trillion have been placed in offshore accounts. Savvy investors realize that the U.S. is not and has not been the go-to place to secure the money. Actually, as far as secure banks are concerned, the U.S. banks rank poorly on the list of the world's most secure banks. And if we have said above, according to Global Finance, the world's 50 safest banks, the U.S. banks ranked 30, 45, and 50 on the list. The tiny farming banks of Agribank, CoBank, AgFirst were the only U.S. banks on the list at that time, and the banks that most U.S. citizens use for finances, Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, are nowhere on the list. So it makes you think, doesn't it? Making less interest on your money in the annual inflation rates erodes it. Taking risky chances investing blindly in the stock market is hardly a way in which you can reach your financial goals. The American dream. The dying American dream, the chances are that you're working hard every day. You may own a business, pay the bills, and act in a financially responsible fashion. The money you have left over and save and attempt to invest in the mercy of the stock market is your nest egg. This is your retirement and your dream to a better life. At any time, greedy lawyers may freeze your bank account, rendering your funds inaccessible. Perceived issues with the IRS, divorce, unpaid medical bills, child support issues, or any judgment can result in having your bank accounts ripped out from underneath you. Even marrying and potentially divorcing has proven to result in financial disaster that many people do not recover from. So why? Because all of your assets may be in the U.S. As such, why are they? They are visible and susceptible to judgments and confiscation, leaving you in the poorhouse. Ending a marriage is emotionally painful, yes, but also devastates people financially. Divorce proceedings can take years to conclude. One can squander tens of thousands or even millions of dollars later. It can leave you with a mere fraction of what you've built. So being financially conscious of this fact will provide you yet another reason. It is another reason to allocate some of your money to an offshore account with strong legal tools. Therein, you can keep your money out of harm's way. That is, having your account in an offshore company or offshore international asset protection trust. Opening an account gives you the freedom to keep your money private and not susceptible to domestic moochers. Positive financial outlook. The media has commonly referred to offshore accounts as tax shelters or tax havens in the past, and the IRS does not heavily scrutinize money invested offshore. Because there were so many advantages to investing money offshore, the IRS has now made it harder for those to seek financial benefits, and the IRS wants its share. In 2009, the Congress passed the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, or FATCA. It stated, as before, the U.S. citizens living abroad need to file their taxes with the IRS. What was new, however, was that financial institutions abroad needed to reveal their U.S. clients who bank with them. And the country got most of its news with regard to Switzerland. The Swiss bank account had and still has tremendous notoriety, and Switzerland is a great country in which to invest or save money. It is known for banking safety and a plethora of investment options. And these regulations turned out to actually be a godsend. This is because it is almost foolish for someone to accuse a U.S. person of offshore tax evasion, when the bank they use is obligated to report tax evasion is much less of an issue. This is because it makes compliance by U.S. people that much easier. Choices. There are dozens of other countries in addition to Switzerland in which to invest your money. Now, please note that it is perfectly legal to bank offshore. U.S. citizens need to report their offshore profits to the IRS. This is a simple layer of due diligence for you to do during tax season. But also note that CPAs and attorneys who understands offshore banking regulations can help. Those are well-versed in the laws and will work to walk you through the simple reporting process. Keeping all of your money in the U.S. banking system nowadays is outdated, unsafe, and uninformed way to invest. Why have your savings at the mercy of a fraudulent, corrupt, rigged system? Getting started. Opening an offshore account isn't really that difficult. However, there are new laws and hoops to jump through, as well as a number of offshore banks who do not accept U.S., Canadian, UK, or Australian depositors. So it is highly recommended to seek a company that is experienced with the ins and outs of offshore banking. Are you interested in finding out more? If so, we can help. There are consultation forms on our website at offshorecompany.com, and that you can complete right now as you listen to this and watch this video. Or you can call us at 1-800-959-8819 or 1-661-253-3303. So feel free to take advantage of these opportunities and reach out to us for help. Thank you.